Well, thank you for agreeing to the invitation or accepting the invitation to come and be a part of this Activate Millions podcast. You are my first interview. You're the very first. So, and of course,
so happy.
So the big question that I just want to go into this as a conversation where we can go into it as much as you want, but the question I want to ask you is like, what does it take for you, and what has it taken for you to share your wisdom, your leading edge out of the box wisdom? And you're a hand analyst, so that's kind of really out of the box for most people. And the question is, just like, what's it taken for you to get there? Or, like just any part of it, what's coming up for you?
So I just want to share that, yes, I've been a hand analyst for the last 29 years, but when I worked in the corporate world, I was doing astrology readings at lunch.
Nice.
So even in the corporate world, I was already out there a little bit. Right?
Yeah.
Astrology is much more well known, of course, and I hadn't even heard of hands when I was in the corporate world. It wasn't until 1991, and I left the corporate world in 1988. So
wow.
But I was already on a leading edge, being different when I was in the corporate world. So I don't know that I've ever not been like that. I mean, I had a friend of mine from elementary school who told me at one of our high school reunions that I had been talking about astrology in 6th grade. So apparently I've always been doing things that were in the metaphysical realm. So yeah. I think I held back in my family a lot, but I don't think I've held back with my friends most of my life. And I was channeling, I have journals that go back to 1978, which was when I was 30, that I was already writing and channeling guidance.
Wow. That's unbelievable. That's awesome. I mean, I'm just like, you're reminding me of like, oh yeah, I've been doing this for a long time too. So yeah. No wonder we're such good friends. For anyone right. listening, Pamela's my BFF.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah. So what's been some of the bigger challenges? Because it's a different world, like doing it at lunchtime, in the corporate world, than it is taking that out of the box wisdom and offering it to the world, and where you're getting paid for it. And I don't know, maybe you were getting paid for astrology readings at lunchtime. I don't know.
I was.
Oh, that's
I mean,
awesome.
it was like $50, it wasn't a lot, but
right.
Yeah, and then after I got out of the corporate world, I was still doing astrology, and I was still getting paid for astrology readings before I discovered hand analysis. So getting paid for doing metaphysical readings was already in my body, already in my experience before I just switched to hands. And it took me a while after I started learning how to read hands before I was embodied with it. To offer it, because, as I have heard so many hand analysts say, well, I don't know everything, so I can't tell anybody anything. And it's like, that's not true. But
it's not even realistic, right?
Right. You're never going to learn. I'm still learning stuff. I have a hand analysis friend, and we talk on Wednesdays, and I just learned something new from her. Because she learned a lot later, so she has new language, and I just learned some new stuff from her on Wednesday. So.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So I don't know, it wasn't, but I was never doing it full time. I was always doing other things until 2007, when all of those doors closed and I had to commit full time to hand analysis. I just had to. Like, it was the only open door. My guidance was like, slam that door shut. Nope, there aren't any other sources of income. You're going to have to make this your thing.
Yeah.
So within a year, I had created some products and started teaching classes on the telephone, because there was no webinar technology available in 2008.
One of the things that I know about you that I'd love for people to know about you too is that you, even though you learned this body of wisdom from somebody else, like, you have really taken ownership of it and woven your own wisdom into that that work, and where you've made it your own. It's not, it still is hand analysis, but
Yeah,
it
it's
has,
still based on what I
yes.
learned. Yeah.
Yeah. So talk about that, because I know that was kind of I've been with you and part of that, like taking ownership of like being this um, master of hand analysis. Yes.
Master hand analyst.
Master
Yes.
hand analyst, and having somebody who was the original, prime creator of this work. And then you're coming in with new language and kind of claiming your space, claiming your spot at the table for that. So what was that like for you, making that shift?
It was an organic process. Like, I didn't just say one day I'm going to do this differently, or I'm going to, like, it just happened. And I am a huge movie fan. I have loved watching movies all of my life, right? So when I started watching movies and started seeing hand analysis and marking showing up consistently in a movie character, is when I started adding additional language and additional perspectives than what I had learned. But I was taking what I already knew and adding, like, oh, here's another aspect of that particular thing. And when I wrote my first book, it was on the heart lines in the hands, the love lines, which was in 2002 when I published the first version of that. But it took me 2 years to write it because I was gathering stories.
Wow.
All of that time from my students, as well as actually, in 2000, I was teaching hands in Houston and Austin. So I'd already been doing live classes in the 90s and everything. I just hadn't done it technology-wise until 2008 on the phone. But I was gathering every time someone in class would tell a great story after class. I'd go and type it up and put it in my big heart folder, my passionate Heartlines folder, and on my computer. So that was when I started adding language and adding perspectives, is through watching movies and TV shows.
That's awesome. And you just brought up something to my mind that I've never thought of before, but it seems true, that when it's ours to take ownership of, we'll start noticing it everywhere. Like, it becomes a part of our awareness, like everywhere we go. Like with the activation codes, like I can see, like, oh, that somebody's reacting to their energy, not really reacting to their, like what they're doing, because it's a mismatch. I can see it and I go, oh, that's the activation there. Like, so.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And then you're taking ownership of it by recording that information and creating records of it. And so, like I do with the activation codes, I like keep track of who's activation codes, and I've got my own little like library of.
It's not so little anymore.
No, it's not so little.
It was little at the beginning 6 years ago. But.
Right. Well, it's fascinating to me that it really is an organic process, and people try to force that, because I remember for myself, like when I was starting out, that was something that people said to do, go and, gather stories about, whatever you're talking about. And I remember thinking, yeah, like that's a good idea, but it wasn't an organic thing. And then, yeah. So when it became organic, I started to do that. It was, and I realized, this is my work. It's not, it's not just everything that I'm gathering stories about. Like, this is my work. And that was true for, the law of attraction. I was just starting to collect stories and
yes.
people around me. And yeah, and it would just happen very organically. So that's really good to remember, as so many people are trying to force their work into the world. So,
and you can't really do it without story. I just want to comment about that. And the reason that you were probably told that by other people is because it works. But the reason that it works is because we are, especially since television came into being, we are educated through story.
Mm-hmm.
Our lives are designed by story. And before television, people would hand stories down, right? They would,
Right.
that's family stories through photographs, or before photographs, it was just verbal, whatever. But story has been the way that information gets passed. So not having stories just makes it blah, blah, blah to me. If people are just giving me data, I can't even take it in anymore. I just can't even hear it if there's not like make it real story that goes along with it.
Yeah,
And I had to learn how to make it real for my clients. I couldn't just say, well, you have a star of Jupiter and it's about being leadership. It's like, so what does that look like in your life? I had to start making it real early, and the movies and the TV shows really helped me have examples to share with my clients. So when I started writing, because I'd already been doing hands for 9 years before I started writing a book.
Wow.
So by the time I started writing a book, I was like, oh, I've got to gather stories, because that's what's going to make a difference to my readers. So all of my books have so many stories.
Yeah, that's another good point that I was thinking of. People will also suggest that we write the book so then we can market the thing. But I have found for myself, like the book doesn't come until it's ready. I know you're a prolific writer. You've written a lot of books, like many, many books.
I have.
But they come after you have some kind of embodied experience with it, and then then it becomes natural. It's sort of like this is the natural next step, and you're just doing it, and it just flows, and it's pretty easy. And I know you're on to something else now as far as writing as well. So, yeah. Well,
that doesn't mean I'll never do any more books on hands. Somebody just asked me this week if I would do a book on something, and I don't know if I will or not. But I realized, oh, my audience may have requests. There may be things that they want me to write, and I hadn't considered that. It's only been motivated from what I'm seeing my clients and students actually need. And my motivation for writing books is I have so much knowledge and information and wisdom about these markings in the hands. I could never pass this on in a class. I could never share everything I know about something in a class. I just can't, or in a reading for sure. I have an hour for reading. I just can't. I could spend 2 hours just talking about one heartline type. I have that much knowledge about and information about stuff. So if I don't write it down, it's just going to die inside of me, and that sucks. There's nothing about that feels good. So that's been my motivation for writing, is so that I have all the wisdom that I have and knowledge about hands gets written down someplace so that my followers can have access to it, because I'm never going to be able to tell them what I know.
Yeah. I remember one of the things that really kind of hooked me into you. There's many things that hooked me into you, and I knew you before we became friends. So that's really good to point out too. I knew who you were years before we became friends. And because of hands, because I'm a curious seeker.
You're right.
So I saw you on a forum somewhere, but two of the things that really struck me as far as why I really wanted to not just work with you, but know you, become friends with you, just be connected to the way you operate is you're so operating out of that intuitive realm. It is how you live and how you operate and how you do your daily life, how you eat food, everything.
Right, everything
is this intuitive expression of you. And I love that so much. And I also really loved how you brought mythology into hands. And you talk about the movies, but I'm not such a big movie person. So some of the movies I wasn't connecting with. I love, though, the mythology and learning about that. And I just thought, that makes so much sense.
It does.
Yeah.
And it's story. Mythology is all story.
Yeah, I agree. And Yes, absolutely. And I know from the work of, hypnotherapy, the subconscious mind, it's the story's got the easiest access to get to the unconscious. I mean, it's just like, it just slides down there and does its work,
Yeah.
and it allows change to happen. So when we're just presenting data, there's no penetration point.
Right, exactly.
Good reminder.
Yes, thank you for sharing that. Yes.
No,
I know that it's true for me.
yeah.
And
Wow.
yeah, I just want to speak to the mythology because that didn't come into my really understanding hands until 8 years after I started learning how to read hands, is when I started reading in more depth about the astrology, because I was going to start teaching a year-long class in Houston. I was living in San Jose at the time, and which is where I am again. But I wanted an expanded conversation, and the mythology was where I really took it and made it my own.
Yeah.
Was applying mythological points that I didn't remember learning about, didn't have in my notes. And so that's where I was really expanding and saying, oh yeah, there's so much more to talk about on these things based on the mythology. So, and I just recently, even last year, I reread the mythology of Venus, Aphrodite, and changed my conversation about the star of Venus, because even though I'd read it before, there was a new thing that I felt and got in my own body. It was like, oh my God, I've got to bring this in.
I love that. I love that you're always learning, and we learn from each other all the time. And that's one of the things that makes me feel like you're one of my favorite people on the planet. It's like we're constantly evolving each other and just helping each other out. Is there anything that you would love for somebody who's on this journey, like this maverick mystics and visionary leaders journey, and they're sharing their wisdom? Like, is there anything you would love, like your wisdom, that you would love for them to know, just to give them some encouragement to keep going?
There are actually two things that have been the most important things for me in this whole journey, and one of it is asking for help.
Yeah.
I mean, there's no way I could be on this journey if I weren't asking for help. And a lot of people look at asking for help as being weak.
Right.
So I am so grateful that I learned early on that is not weak, because otherwise it would have been terrifying. And I would have felt like I had to do it all myself. And it's not possible. It's exhausting. It's overwhelming to try to do all of it yourself. And of course, you're going to make errors and do things that don't need to be done. And then you get into being mean to yourself and beating yourself up for having done it wrong. And it could have all been avoided if you just asked for help. So that's the first thing, is asking for help, ask for help, ask for help. And get over whatever belief systems you have about that being a problem in whatever way you think that's a problem.
Yeah.
And learning who to ask was also an important part of the journey. It's not just anybody. It's somebody who has mastery in that particular area, right? That you don't want to, just because somebody's offering it as a class or a webinar or something, doesn't mean that they're good enough for you or that they're the right person for you.
Yeah.
And so the kind of help you ask for matters. And I know from reading thousands of hands that there are no two hands the same. So nobody is designed the same way you are. So the kind of people you need to ask for help is going to be your choice, not theirs. And you need to trust your gut. So this is the second piece of advice, is you have to learn how to have a relationship with your intuition, and trust your intuition and trust your gut, trust your instincts. Like that, nothing matters more than that in terms of having things be easy. If you want it to continue being hard, you can continue to ignore your gut and instincts and intuition. But if you want things to be easier, intuition is the path. Everybody has it. Mm-hmm. Everybody has it. I was just listening to Oprah's podcast the other day about whisper, like you get a whisper, and if you don't listen to the whisper gets louder, and if you don't listen to that, then it's going to get dramatic at some point. And so how dramatic does it have to get? Right? Look at your life. And she made a comment that I hadn't remembered hearing her, but I knew she had talked about this, of course, when she had her show on network TV, was that any dramatic thing that happens, the whisper has always been there. What is the whisper? What is the thing? That's always been there. What's the pattern? That's how I would talk about what's the pattern in this drama that you're suddenly feeling happened, and it's been going on all along. So your intuition helps you with that a lot, so you don't have to get into big drama.
Yes, I agree. If we were all just using our intuition and trusting ourselves, the world would be such a better place.
Well, it is for those of us who are doing it.
Yes, it is. It's so much easier.
Yeah.
And when we are not those, you and I, when we're not trusting ourselves and trusting it's painful for other people to be around us.
Right. I know. Dawn tells me the hardest thing for me, when she's in relationship with me, is when I'm not trusting something. So when I'm stuck with something, I'll say, I know I'm stuck. I know that I'm not trusting something. And I just thank you for being here for me anyway.
Yeah.
I know this is not easy, but you also love the problem-solving process.
Oh, I love it. Yeah. I love being in that space with you because it's always beautiful. It's something magical is always coming through that, like those, and for me too, it's like there's, and it's very uncomfortable for me as well to go into those places, but always magic comes out of them. And for me, like, who do I trust? I'm thinking like, this is really a good point too. Like, I tend to trust people who I know have my back and who actually know me. It's so hard for me to take a class or to do something. I've learned this over time. I can do it by myself as long as I'm not expecting them to give any, back and forth. But when I need some solid support, I am not asking, I can't even ask an expert or, like the guru or somebody who thinks that they know everything. I have to know somebody who knows me, like who I trust to have my back. So that's been a big thing, learning and discerning like who's got my back and who doesn't. So.
Right. I would agree that that's what I do too. I hadn't put it in those terms, but I would agree that I've cultivated and developed relationships with people who have my back, and those are the people I go to first. Yeah,
absolutely. Any final things? Anything else that you think, man, I've got some airtime here. I want to share anything?
Well, I do want to say, if you're quote, coming out of the closet, this is what I have a lot of clients who have done this, coming out of the closet on being intuitive. This is the most common holdback that I see with my clients, is people who are saying, I use intuition, I can feel it for other people, and I don't want to tell anybody I'm doing this. Right?
Yeah.
You've dealt with this with people too. Yeah. I hear this so often, and my wisdom on this is, at some point you're just going to have to get over yourself, and look at whatever the belief system is that's holding you back, because it isn't yours. Whatever that belief system is something you borrowed from somebody else. You're listening to somebody else. You're putting power outside of you and giving your power away to somebody else, and to try to keep other people happy or to take care of them in some way. That's what's happening when you're not coming out of the closet around your intuition. And I would say that issue, whatever that belief system is what needs to be addressed. That's the thing. So you're going to have to get real with yourself about who you're taking care of, because that's what's at stake. Who are you taking care of by not being out with your intuition.
And let me make sure I understand this, and especially for other listeners, like the who are you taking care of could be like the sick mother that you just don't want to, like know that you're coming out as an intuitive, or the brother who is so against people using their intuition because they're afraid. I mean, people are afraid of intuitive people because we know things, right?
They are.
Do. I don't know everything, and I have my rules of what I receive. However, yeah.
Right.
So that's what you're talking about.
And it could be a church, right?
Yeah.
It could be a religion.
Got it.
It could be. I was just having this conversation with a client the other day of the community of people that he hangs out with. That the people he's chosen for a particular reason, he doesn't feel comfortable, and some people in his work environment, it's okay. And some others it's not. Some people in his family, it's okay. Some it's not. Right. So there are a lot of different opportunities for holding back, depending on who you're choosing to be with. And I have, outside of my family of origin, I have cultivated only relationships with highly intuitive people. And I don't want to be in relationship with people who aren't. I had someone tell me a few years ago when I made that comment in a Tantra group, and she said, well, I feel like I can't ever be your friend. And I said, well, cultivate your intuition and then you can be my friend. But why would I want to hang out with non-intuitive people? I can't even imagine. I did that in the past. Why would I want to do that? There's nothing in that serves me. There's nothing in there that's fun for me. Right. It's hard work. It's challenging. It's like, why would I do that? There's like no point. So, but it was a choice, a conscious choice.
Right.
Many, many, many years ago that I said, I'm only going to hang out with intuitive people because it's where I am. It's where I get seen. It's who has my back.
Yes. Yeah, that's so true. Yeah. That's good.
So, who are you taking care of? Who are you taking care of that you don't get to be who you are?
Yeah. I love that you brought in the church too. Like that we could be taking care of our whole belief system, like our whole religious beliefs, by holding it in. And sometimes we make up stories that other people believe something and it's not even true, but we're still taking care of that so we can somehow remain important, whatever. Yeah.
It was to stay in fear, right? Because a lot of people are afraid. And here's the other thing I hear. I can be intuitive for other people, but not me. So here's what I'm calling bullshit on that one, because here's the reality. Intuition is intuition. And the reason that you may say that is you may not want to hear what your intuition is saying to you, and so you don't want to hear it.
Right.
But it isn't that you can't.
That is so true. Because I remember being like that. I totally remember being in a space many, many years ago before I had kids and thinking like, I'm so intuitive for everybody else. I'm not intuitive for me. But the whole truth of that was like, I just did not want to listen to what my intuition was saying, because it was saying a bunch of stuff that like, stop doing this, start doing that. And I'm like, no way. I don't want that kind of change. Yes.
Right.
So true.
I don't want to stop drinking coffee, even though my body is saying I need to stop drinking coffee. Right. So I know we don't always want to hear what our intuition. And by the way, some people get visions. Some people get intuitive downloads. They feel things in their body. They hear voices. They just know stuff. It's not like there's any right or one way. I have multiple methods that now I recognize. I get intuitive downloads and hits. So that was a cultivated process, by the way, was learning how intuition comes to me. And I think that's an important conversation for people to be in, is learning how intuition comes to you.
Yeah.
Because it's not going to be the same as somebody else. In fact, just 2 days ago, yesterday, I don't know, sometime in the last couple of days, I was talking with a client who's very intuitive, who said, oh, I was trying to be like that person. Like I wanted to do my intuition like that person. And it's like, well, that's not your design.
Right.
It doesn't mean, and so she was holding back sharing any of her intuition because she wasn't doing it like that person. Well, that person is that person, and that's their design. And, you know, she was talking about the Long Island medium. Well, that's how she gets intuition, right?
I don't think I could do it like her, but yeah.
I don't want to do it like her. That's not what I'm called to do with my intuitive skill set. It isn't to talk to, I do talk to dead people, but it isn't the way that she does it, right? And even when somebody was on, and Tyler Henry, all three of them have had television shows talking to dead people, and they all have different methods.
Yeah. I like Tyler's.
Does all of it.
He writes, or, you know, scribbles, and I'm like, oh, that's kind of like me, except for I actually write.
Yeah.
So, yeah,
And he uses all different methods. He sees things, hears things, feels things, knows things, gets visions. I mean, he uses all of that. I loved watching his journey and how he was. I don't know if he's still on because I don't get cable TV anymore. But
yeah,
But they're all different, and they're all talking to dead people. They're all doing it differently, and so it's what it is. You know, trust yourself, trust your own system, trust your own style.
Yes. Great words to end on. So thank you so much, Pamelah. I appreciate you. I love you. And I'm so glad that you're in my life and that I get to share you with people who are listening to the podcast.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks so
Me
much.
too. Okay.